I'm joined today by two individuals who bring a lot of industry experience to the session. Jim has worked with retailers all around the world on not only customer management, but category management and some of the other related tools. Jean-Marc has an experience as a strategic consultant working across a number of Fortune 500 companies. Together, they're the co-founders of Customer Management Partners and will be the primary presenters today. The problem we're going to talk about helping you solve today is how to use customer identified transaction data to capture new sources of growth. Frankly, this is the cornerstone of the whole omnichannel movement that the industry is going through. And up until now, it's been very difficult to integrate online and offline customer data and to convert that to value. The customer management process provides a framework that grocery retailers and brands can use to put the customer right at the center of their go-to-market strategy, and in the process unlock that new growth. The unlocking occurs as the process guides the retailer and the brands to shift resources from less productive spending areas in marketing and promotion to more productive areas, and hence drives the growth. One of the real advantages of this process is that it not only is complete and logical, but it's also scalable because the process includes all the rules necessary to translate that data into positive action and growth. All one needs to do is to automate those rules in the customer management process. So that's the introduction, and on with the presentation.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks everyone for being with us. At the core of customer management is the business process you see here. And by the way, just to be clear, when we say customer, we mean the retailer's customer, the people shopping the store. Now, the purpose of customer management is to unlock profitable growth for the retailer and its trading partners. The process you see here is primarily fueled by customer identified transaction data, but it can also be supplemented with other sources of data and insights from the brands. Now, the process is piloted by the retailer, but as we'll see today, the brands have an essential role in bringing it to life. It involves a sequential set of activities that we've bucketed into these 5 steps. Starting from the left, we have customer understanding, which quantifies customer performance, breaking it down by segment. It provides insights that point to growth opportunities and fuel the rest of the process. Customer strategy defines which customer groups will be prioritized, their financial objectives, and the major growth initiatives the retailer will pursue with its trading partners. Customer planning formulates a roadmap for each customer segment, lays out the marketing, merchandising, and brand tactics for that segment. Customer execution determines specific assortment, pricing, and promotion decisions down to the item level. I mean, as we'll see, this process is highly prescriptive because it impacts the everyday marketing and merchandising decisions of a retailer. And then lastly, customer monitoring tracks performance versus the plan and proposes any necessary adjustments. So that's it for the process. The 3 boxes underneath are the necessary IT, analytic, and organizational requirements needed to implement customer management. We won't have time to go into these today, but we're happy to have follow-up conversations with people and help you think about where your company stands with respect to these requirements. Good. So if we move on to the next page, our plan today is to take you on a quick tour of each of these steps, and we're going to start with customer understanding. The first thing we need to recognize is that different customers expect different things from the retailer. So here we have a customer. Those of you who attended the previous webinar might recognize her as Emily. She cares about food quality and where it comes from. She favors premium brands, as you can see from the images. Now, the retailer has a lot of customers like Emily, so it creates a segment for them and calls them deluxe meals customers. Now, on the other side, we have someone very different. Maria is too busy to cook. Saving time is more important than saving money. She looks for foods that are easy and quick to prepare. She eats on the go a lot. She's a bit impulse driven. Now, the retailer also has a lot of customers like Maria, so it creates a segment for them and calls them easy meals. So if you're a grocery retailer, you typically need to serve both these customers at once. And actually, it's even more complicated than that. You might need to serve 7 or 8 kinds of customers, each as different as the 2 we showed you on the last page. So this page shows the distribution of customers at a typical grocery retailer. Starting from the left, we have deluxe people like Emily. Then we have healthy meals customers who are motivated by staying healthy or losing weight. We have modern meals customers who are looking to cook simple and basic meals. They like to barbecue and buy easy cooking ingredients, chicken, ground beef, tortillas, and so on. We have easy meals customers like Maria. We have baked meals customers who enjoy baking from scratch at home. They buy desserts and ice cream and everyday items, eggs, dairy, flour, bread, so on. Then we have old style meals customers who are looking to put a square meal on the table for their family. They buy traditional products from well-known brands. And finally, we have budget meals customers who are looking to save money. They buy just the basics, items on sale, often in small packages to minimize the ring of the cash register. So here's a little secret. Before you go out and pay someone a lot of money to create a shopper segmentation for you, we've looked at customer segments at different grocery retailers in different parts of the US. And while each retailer called them by different names and the percentages were different, the profiles were consistently similar to the ones I just described. So there you go. Hopefully I just did part of the work for someone. What happens if we overlay the manufacturer on this chart? The gray areas represent the number of customers reached by a typical large manufacturer. We actually used ConAgra for the example, though it's not written on the page. If there's someone from ConAgra present, I hope you don't mind. Maybe it'll give you some ideas. What it says is this. For example, looking at deluxe customers, we have 2.9 million total customers, of which 175,000 bought at least one ConAgra product over the last period. Looking at healthy, of the 2.5 million total customers, 309,000 bought ConAgra products, and so on. Looking where ConAgra's customers are, we see a clear skew towards easy meals. Of the 2 million or so easy meals customers, nearly half of them, or 961,000, bought ConAgra products. This is a really powerful insight because it tells us that ConAgra and the retailer both have an interest in growing the easy meals segment, and they're natural partners for working on it together with a focus on the customer. So now I'll turn it over to Jim, who will take us through the next couple of steps.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. I'm going to talk about customer strategy. In my experience, I found that some people really have a hard time conceptualizing what is meant by strategy, or sometimes even why strategy is even needed at all. And I found sometimes the easiest way to explain strategy is explain an example of no strategy. And to me, an example of no strategy is, let's just say you get in your car and you have no idea where you want to go. And you just take any road and you start driving. Now, there's no right or wrong road decisions on changes to make because you don't have a designation in place, and you just end up where you end up. To me, a strategy is critical because it provides you the roadmap. It lets you know where you want to end up and how you're progressing to doing that. And for customer strategy, we've identified 5 key activities that are required in creating the customer strategy. 1, establishing your customer priorities. 2, setting your performance targets. 3, determining the approaches to reach goals that you want to accomplish. 4, formulating the guidelines for others in the organization and your trading partners to follow. And 5, allocating budgets and resources. I'm going to show you a couple examples of the kind of work that is done in customer strategy. Let's start by establishing how the retailer achieve its revenue target from a customer's perspective. This template is used to establish the revenue strategy and top line targets for each customer segment. As you'll notice over here, the customer segments are the same that John Mark talked about in the understanding. And from that understanding, we have answers to such questions as, how critical is customer segments performance to the overall retailer's business? How is it trending and why? And what is its potential opportunities? How easy is it to obtain? What are the potential threats? How real? How big? The answers to these types of questions set the agenda for prioritizing the customer segments. So one of the top things that you end up doing over here is coming up with your revenue strategy. In reality, we would be doing revenue, profit, customer lifetime value, but for lack of time, we're just going to focus on the revenue strategy. And what we're looking for is determination of what the role needs to be in the revenue strategy of these different segmentations to be able to accomplish over here the top line growth revenue for the retailer, which in this case is 1.7% increase in sales. So looking at the different segments, we've gone through and identified that the deluxe meals are a primary role in driving revenue. And a major reason why in this case was because a competitor of the retailers who served more of the deluxe customers is closing, and therefore there's a large opportunity to be able to go and grab those customers on Brown. So we want to go and develop those. And we pick a revenue target with the growth and percentage growth of being able to accomplish that. We identify a role for each one of the customers. We're going to deal with Easy Meals again going through here. They're a secondary group. Our intention is to develop their revenue. The reason we think there's a potential to do that is the data showed us that when Easy Meals ended up raising its price on a lot of frozen good activities, frozen good products, that a number of his customers started taking their trips in business to other competitors, and we think there's a potential to win them back. And therefore, that's where we're going up with the sales increase of 1. So we basically have been able to go through, put this in order. This allows the retailer to make sure that different people in the organization know the role that's going to put in place, and therefore have the resources, et cetera, to back that up. For instance, the resources behind the old style meal customers to grow revenue are not going to get nearly as much resources because it's a minor component as will the deluxe customers. One of the other real key components that we found that customer identified data brings when you put customer management into place is being able to dig through the data and be able to find major initiatives that were hidden. A couple great examples of this that have been used in the past. Tesco went through and it discovered, it was actually looking at the checkout lines and discovered that its customers were not happy with having the candy, et cetera, in the lanes, which brought them to some interesting thinking to sit and say, well, what other things are our customers interested in that we should be providing and could put there? And a crazy thing came out of it. The retailer, Tesco, ended up finding that key components of what their customers wanted had nothing to do with grocery. They were looking for auto programs, insurance, and travel. And having that insight, they actually took and put those programs on the checkout line instead. Another example of being ahead of their time was Safeway. It looked at its data and what the customers were telling it, and it discovered that health claims, nutrition, and ingredient information were really important to their customers. And years before any other retailers went into it, they put a mobile app in there that allowed that information to be available to their customers who were shopping. So the key here is going through the data on an annual process and finding initiatives that are important to the customer that actually cross across categories in the whole store. And an example of one of the retailers we worked with was introducing these line of single portion meals, expanding their premium owned brands, expanding the organic products, and expanding their local food sourcing. This is key to the retailer, but as you can tell, this is not something that the retailer can do on their own. And therefore, one of the key components ends up being, in this case, was looking to see what manufacturers could go and play well. If you remember correctly, when we were looking at ConAgra, they were a big player with easy meals, so they are a natural to be able to go through and put in place here. I'm going to move on to customer planning then. So why do retailers need to plan for customers? I mean, the key component here is because customers are the source of all revenue. And that planning for customers is shown to deliver profitable growth. Customer analysis has shown that the best predictor of product sales is not market share or dollar opportunity or promotional lifts. But working with the data, we found that actually customer-based forecasting gives you the best forecast for doing plans. Other industries have been doing this for some time. Airlines, hospitality, and finance have all been doing this customer planning, but this is still relatively new for retail. If you look for the gold standard in retail of who's being able to forecast and plan their customer revenue and profit, and at retail, it has to be Amazon. Amazon has showed how to change the sales model from looking at selling one product to as many customers as possible to selling one customer as many products over their lifetime as possible. This pivoting of going from a product to a customer, an example of this was we were working with an East Coast retailer, and the meat category manager was deciding whether to put top sirloin or ground beef on the front of the page of the circular. And the category manager picked the top sirloin because it had the highest dollar sales. Well, that was the right thing for the category, but not the right thing for the business. When looking at it from the customer perspective, we said that while the top sirloin brought in the most dollars because it had a higher price, the ground beef actually would have brought in more people into the store. Also, a large percent of the top sirloin buyers were cherry pickers. Not usually who we think of cherry pickers, but cherry pickers today are actually people that are having more money, well-to-do, and have the time to shop. And they were only doing this top sirloin as a secondary fill and not doing baskets. Where the ground beef, while bought by less cherry pickers, were actually being bought by more of the retailer's best customers, and therefore driving more traffic and larger baskets. Now, for those of you who didn't attend our previous webinar, we're not suggesting removing category management or category planning. What we're saying rather that customer planning should be a complementary component of planning. To create a successful customer plan, we have come up with 6 key areas it needs to cover. First is assessment. understanding the what and why of the customer performance and its trends. 2, a scorecard, setting the target objectives on which the customer performance will be measured and monitored. 3, developing the strategies around marketing, merchandising, supply, and in-store services that will achieve the the customer subcategory objectives. 4, determining the marketing and merchandising directives. In this case, that means spelling out the specific work activities that each part of the organization is accountable for. 5th, trade partners. Retailers can't do this alone. They must collaborate with their partners to maximize their unique resources for common objectives, and they need to have budgets, et cetera, put in place. Quickly looking at a scorecard, customer approach is that we're managing segments as business units. That means we're going beyond just looking at customer satisfactions or promotional scores and actually looking into revenue and numbers. The category plan for Easy Meals was a 1% increase in sales. What we need to do is understand the sales drivers that get us to that place. They need to lower their price from the year before that was a disaster. This lowering the price while decreasing sales actually increases the units per sale per basket, which increases the dollar per baskets to support sales. Also, we end up having a frequency increase because we're winning people back, which gets our dollars per customer bigger. And we also are able to win back some lapsed customers. Well, how do you do that? How do you get that forecasting? The key is the building blocks that put in place. To get to those kinds of sales increase, we're able to look at the different product groups to understand the changes that are put in place, to understand the decisions on increasing the promotions, et cetera, to put in place. We use prescriptive models that put in place that are driven by what we call a product priority. Product priority basically looks, in this case, we're going to look at a specific item within the Easy Meals customers, and let's look at the frozen entree customers. And we want to come up with what is the importance of this category to the retailer and what is the importance of the category to the customer. We put a lot of different metrics in here, but a few things that are key. If you look at the sales dollars for frozen entrees, it ranks 23rd overall within the store if you're using an average customer. But for the Easy Meals, it's the number 3 ranking category, as well as from the importance to customer of that is Sarah Wallet. It ranks 38 overall, but for the Easy Meal customers, it's 2. Those values allow you to come over here and designate frozen entrees categories as a primary product going forward. What is a primary product? And meaning we want to go through and give it a consistent superior. We want to be able to make sure we price it the right way. We want to make sure we promote it the right way, et cetera. And then we take the individual category product groups within that Easy Meal buys, and we're able to go through and identify and put those together. That's important, that's key, but how does the manufacturer put into play? Well, in this case, we're going to look at ConAgra for Easy Meals and be able to look across here and say, for the primary customer, their pot pies, their steak and ale end up being consistent, will be primary providers to the Easy Meal segments. The preferred will do things like their pies and their fries. And then a minor component over here will be their fudge, et cetera. Just a hint on a different one, while the Duncan Hines fudge brownies are a minor provider to the Easy Meals, another segment inside the retailer being the bake they would put in flour. So this is a direction, this is the plan, but the plan is worthless if it's not executed, and John Mark will take a few minutes here and go into the execution component.
Thanks, Jim. So customer execution is about putting everything Jim talked about into practice in day-to-day decisions. retailers are constantly making decisions about what products to carry at what price, in which store, with what promotion, shelf space, and so on and so on. What we're going to talk about here is how the retailer can translate the customer insights and priorities we talked about before into these day-to-day decisions. But we're going to flip the script on traditional category management, because instead of using customer insights to drive product sales, we're going to use product decisions to drive customer sales. And here's how it can be done. We're using a single item for this example, Marie Callender's chicken pot pie. Now, the first box shows you the kinds of item characteristics we've developed. Each row is derived analytically by combining various metrics computed from the retailer's loyalty data. And if you look at these characteristics, you'll see that a lot of them don't really talk about the product itself. They talk about the customer who buys the product, like, for example, whether they're price sensitive, or whether they use the mobile app, or it talks about the impact that the product has on customer behavior. So this one drives traffic to the store. It's a traffic builder, we can see up there. It can be used to defend the customer from going to other retailers, and so on and so forth. Now, from these characteristics, moving over to the right, we then use prescriptive analytics to make recommendations on assortment, pricing, promotion, and target marketing for that product. This approach is a radical improvement compared to current practice. First, it makes product decisions that are much more targeted to the customer. And second, it's much more granular in that it can inform decisions right down to the individual UPC or store or even customer. And it's made possible because we're automating the process with algorithms and business rules so that it's scalable over the entire business and allows fact-based decisions to be made on every category and item, not just the top sellers. Now, it's an approach that's caused some retailers to revamp the layout of their stores. We don't have time right now to go into examples, but we're happy to follow up offline with anyone who's interested. Good. So on the next page, we just want to finish with a recap of the different ways in which retailers and brands can work together more effectively. If you work at a manufacturer or a retailer, I challenge you to think about your business and how you can enhance the way you work with your trading partners in these 5 areas. So starting from the top, customer strategy is about how can we refocus our trading relationships on growing customers rather than products. It's understanding which customers we both have an interest in going after and aligning our efforts and investments on those in the same way Conagra identified the Easy Meals customer. Customer initiatives, that's about working together on things like single portion meals. One thing about these initiatives, as Jim mentioned, is that they transcend individual categories, so they need to be managed at a higher level than the retailer's category management organization. Customer plans is about defining how your brands will contribute to the retailer's customer plans. In the Conagra example, it's understanding what the retailer wants to do with Easy Meals, what the product priorities are for that segment, and defining how we'll use Marie Callender to go after them. Key brands and items is about developing assortment, pricing, and promotion tactics down to individual items, much like you do today, except now they're aligned against customer objectives, not just category objectives. It's how the Marie Callender promotion plan is now aimed at recapturing customers and trips, not just meeting a top-line number. And one-to-one marketing is leveraging the increasingly effective personalization platforms available to retailers and using them to support the customer strategy we talked about. Our experience shows that a lot of growth potential is available to retailers and brands when they work together in these areas. Back to you, Bill.
Jean-Marc and Jim, thank you very much. what excites me about this is that customer identified transaction data or loyalty data has been around for quite some time. But now you've got a framework to create value and, more importantly, growth, and a framework that also is a basis, as you've just pointed out, Jean-Marc, for collaboration between retailer and brand. So as the brands who are on the webinar begin to think about this, and I know many of you are thinking about the store of the future, also think about what the path to purchase and the shopping experience of the future may be, and how the possibility of customer management can fit into that process. I'd certainly encourage anyone who's interested in beginning to think this way to reach out to any one of the three of us just to try out your ideas. This is new. You probably want to get some confirmation, and at no obligation, we'd be very pleased to have that kind of conversation. Our goal is to encourage adoption and ultimately broad scale use of this process because it's so central to the way grocery retailing and shopping will be executed in the future.